He's the pastor of Annunciation Catholic Church and St. Paul's Catholic Church in Brazil, Indiana. And he's also the Catholic chaplain for Pastoral University and Putnamville Correctional Institute. Thank you, Father.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's good to be with you. And I just wanted to dive right in and honor your time. So a little bit about what I wanted to do is just kind of start with some stories from my pastoral experience and share those with you, and then use those throughout my presentation so that, in the hope that it might help give some context and so forth. And so I was ordained a priest in 2009, actually June 6th, so I'm just one day into my 10th year of priesthood. Thank you. Thanks. So I was ordained in 2009, and I was, well, let me back up just a little bit before that. Right out of college, I was a math major, and I had my teaching license. So for 2 years, I taught at one of our Catholic high schools in Indianapolis on the north side, Bishop Chatard High School. And I was a math teacher and a coach, but I had already told everyone I was going to go to the seminary, but I just didn't want to stay in school. I needed a break. So I taught for 2 years, taught mathematics and coached, and so I got to be around high school students and everything and use my teaching license in that way. And then I went to the seminary for 6 years and then was ordained in 2009. So I'm assigned to the West Side Catholic High School, Cardinal Ritter High School in Indianapolis. And now, since I had a teaching license, I was asked to teach theology, rightly so, I guess. And got involved there, and I loved that. And so I was at Cardinal Ritter High School for 3 years. And I want to walk through some things that happened as a theology teacher my first year in 2010 at Cardinal Ritter High School, because hopefully this will help as we go. So my first year of teaching theology at Cardinal Ritter High School, everything went really well. So I had these in my mind. I had those lessons that I thought were going to be lightning, bolt things that, they were going to charge the front of the classroom, to crucify me over. And so I was ready, right? I'm ready for contraception. I'm like, we're going to nail the contraception lesson. And we did. So when I got to that, and I'm teaching that, and they're all just like, cool, that's fine. And I'm like, wait, no, I said contraception. Did you hear what I said? Your parents, if I preached on this, I would get destroyed, right? And the parents, you guys are all just sitting there, and they're all like, yeah, it's great, contraception, and we're not going to use it. That's great. It's bad. Okay. I'm like, wow. Part of me, my pride, I'm like, man, I nailed that. I'm like, because they are totally just whatever. That's great. So I'm like, man, I'm doing a great job. So it comes time, towards the end of the year, again, every lesson had gone really well. It came time to teach homosexuality. And I tried to do 2 or 3 hours of prep, for my classes. We were on block scheduling, so you had to fill 90 minutes. And so, but for whatever reason, in leading up to the homosexuality class, I had other duties that come up, as the chaplain, and I got pulled in these different directions. So I didn't have a lot of time to prepare. But when it came time to teach this lesson, I didn't do a good job. I did not do a good job of preparing. And so when I got up there, though, and something else happened. In teaching it and realizing it, not only did I know I had done a bad job of preparing it, the students were militantly angry and were ready to storm the front of the class. They swore at me. They had not sworn all year. There was none of that. There was always a great dialogue and respect, and they were standing up, swearing at me, and didn't care that they were going to get detention or suspension or whatever. And I realized in that moment that something had happened since I had left high school teaching the 6 years prior. That this issue came up literally kind of out of nowhere, and that I, as a priest, in 6 years of seminary, did not have the answers to the questions that they were asking. I did not, at least on the tip of my tongue, I did not have them. So the second year, right? Year 2 of teaching, we did homosexuality over 4 classes. I was ready to teach. We went into everything. I researched for 400 hours, right? I was like, I'm not going to make the same mistake that I did last time. And so that went better, right? It was better because I knew that there was going to be hostility, and it went better, and it was more well received, partly because I was prepared. But here's the crazy thing that happens year 2, right? So I filmed my classes, as I had done that for 2 years. I filmed my classes, so I filmed these classes that I taught on homosexuality, And it just so happened that it was time to leave for spring break when my third class on my final homosexuality class ended. I put it online, and I literally got on a plane and went to Rome. A priest friend and I were traveling to Rome. So I get over to Rome, and like 3 or 4 days in, a seminarian friend comes down to the dinner hall and was like, hey, do you know that you are going viral? I said, well, how would I? What are you talking about? On the gay blogosphere, your classes you're everywhere. And so we went to this seminarian's room, and we were reading, gay blogs about myself, which I told him, I said, if I get you thrown out of the seminary, I'm sorry. I'll talk to the rector or whatever. But it was literally on all these blogs, watch Catholic priest indoctrinate students into hate and all these other things. And my picture was like color transposed and devil horns and all these other things. And like a part of it was like, it was weird. There was this really odd sense when you're getting attacked for something. So that was year 2, and out of that then kind of comes this, somehow like I went, from this to being like a priest who's talking about this thing, this issue of homosexuality, where I did not see that coming at all. And that put me in a position, all of that suffering and persecution and threats of lawsuits from all over the country and all these other things, put me in a position to then make the Third Way and go out and fundraise and serve as executive producer of that. But one of the things that helped year 2, and so I'll share this with you, this might be the first thing you might be interested in writing down. One of the things that I gave my students that second year was I gave them a couple of excerpts from a book called Faith at the Edge. It is written by young adult Catholics. It's a collection of really short, entertaining, in a sense, essays about real issues. So again, it's Faith at the Edge. And I'm trying to think of it's from God Spy. It's produced by God Spy. I believe the editor's last name is Matera, M-A-T-E-R-A. But I had them read 2 excerpts from that, which were from Eve Tushnet, and the other one was from, he was using a pseudonym at the time, which I can't think of the name at the moment. But anyways, we interviewed him for the Third Way. So there's 2 essays in Faith at the Edge by young adult Catholics who talk about living with same-sex attraction and why they love the Catholic Church. And so when I had my students read that was the only thing that really convinced them, right? That was the only thing that really started to speak to them, and I could see it in their faces as they were reading the essays. This is good. Like, this is helping me, right? Hearing somebody, it's that old, the thought from Paul VI that, people do not listen to teachers anymore, they listen to witnesses. And so that was then the impetus for when I saw the looks on the faces of my students while they're reading these essays, I said, these people's stories are the ones that we need to tell. We need to let these people tell their stories who live with same-sex attraction, wrestling with this, and yet staying true and seeing hope in their church. So that's what the Third Way was. We went out and interviewed people and let them tell the story, right? And then only at the end did we bring in Christopher West and Chris Stefanik and Jason Everett, right? So that whole story kind of formed me in a way. So I want to say then, and I'll reference these stories from my past a little bit as we go through this, but a couple of things then I want to say that I learned in this whole incident that then I think would apply, of course, to how we approach this transgender issue as well, which probably since 2011 has done almost the exact same thing as homosexuality did, which was kind of explode and be this issue that it is, and this concern that we rightly have as pastoral leaders in the church. One of the things that I learned from that instance that I brought into how I approach pastorally this transgender issue is I think it's really important for all of us to know, whether we're catechists, whether we're teachers, if we're speaking in any way, or teaching in any way, or leading in any way on behalf of the church, we need to know, and the previous speaker brought it up, and I want to hit on it a little bit more even. There is a difference between teaching a group about the teaching of the church and talking to a person individually who is wrestling with it, right? Who is living with that particular thing. There is a difference between teaching or catechizing a group and talking with an individual person. And I think that if you are are leading, if you're in charge of teachers, if you're in charge of catechists, please, I would say, emphasize that with them, right? That's the first thing that we have to know. We have to understand that if I'm talking to a group of people and I'm teaching what the church teaches, I'm teaching the catechism, right? I need to know and go into that with a different approach than I do if I'm talking to a person who's coming to me to talk to me about what their life struggles are. And I would say, and then a couple more things about that. Have the person, whoever it is, if it's a catechist or a teacher or whoever it is, acknowledge that regularly throughout the presentation. So when you're teaching about it or you're talking about it, I would start with, and then I would say about 400 times throughout the talk, please know that what I'm doing in this act is teaching the catechism, and you can make it your own words, right, of course. But what I'm doing, young people, is here I'm teaching what the church teaches. Please know that in doing that if you would ever want to come and talk to me, this is not where we're going to start. Right? If you come talk to me, it would be a different conversation. I would just say that and name it at the very beginning. Now, I did that in my talks, but I didn't repeat it enough. And so that part never made it on to the gay blogosphere, right? And I think we need to just stop and regularly remind our young people of that, right? That this is the church's teaching, and I'm going to present it with passion and excitement and energy and love and charisma. But that if you have a question or you ever want to come talk to me, please know that this is not, it's a different type of conversation, right? I also think it's important to let our catechetical leaders, our teachers, whoever it is, know that both types of things are pastoral. Both types of conversations. Catechizing as a group is a pastoral act, right? It's not just a teaching. It's not algebra, right? I taught algebra, right? That is like, do it right, come up, do it again, do it again, do it again, you got it wrong, right? The catechetical act, the teaching act to a group of people, a class, a youth group, whatever it is, that is pastoral, or it at least needs to be that way, right? I need to understand what I'm doing in this work as a pastoral act. Of course, the individual meeting, which we'll talk about here in a minute, is also pastoral. I'm going to shepherd that person or walk with that person. But please understand, our catechetical leaders need to understand that their teaching in a group is also pastoral. Okay. What I want to do is offer advice for both acts. Right? So advice that I would share with people in this catechetical setting, this teaching a classroom or a youth group, and then I want to talk about some advice pastorally for what would happen when you're in a one-on-one conversation with a student. Okay, so the advice for group catechesis, I have a couple of major pieces of advice. The first is based off of the third way and what I learned from that whole experience. If there's any way at all possible, when you are doing group catechesis on this topic, find someone, written or video-wise, who can tell you and can tell the students from experience what you're going to teach them, right? So if there's a video online, if you can find, I'm trying to work, unfortunately, like I'm a pastor of 2 parishes in a university, so I would love to work on the third way follow-up, with transgender people who are wrestling with those issues, but then are also seeing the truth of the Catholic Church. Somehow finding people like that, whether it's written form in an essay or whatever, finding people starting with that, right? Start with the experience of someone who is living that situation and who can share that with your students. That then leads the way into the teaching, right? If you start with the catechism, if we'd started the third way with Jason Everett and Chris Stefanik and Christopher West, no one would have cared. It wouldn't have had, I don't think, the impact. So if you can find anybody like that, if you can find somebody that might even potentially come in and give a talk, you'd have to work through your whole process there with your administration and so forth. But that would be my first piece of advice. Here's the second piece of advice, which I wish I had given to I didn't know this going in, but I learned this lesson from being on the gay blogosphere episode. And that is this. My second piece of advice for group catechesis. If you're giving group catechesis, do not imagine that you are giving this presentation to an atheist who is angry, combative, and a secular lawyer. That's what I always imagined in the back of my classroom. And that is bad. And I wish I hadn't. Because here's why, right? I came out of an experience, as probably a lot of people in my generation, who their faith was they were not given the tools, we were not given the tools maybe to use our faith, to defend our faith, right? So we went to college, and we maybe I felt like I was Catholic, I love my Catholic faith, but I couldn't explain it, and I couldn't articulate it, because I felt like I hadn't given enough to defend it. So most of us, you go to your university as a Catholic, and your faith is attacked, right? And you don't know what to say, so you get mad. Like there's a part that engenders a sort of, I think, like a righteous anger. Like, or many people unfortunately fold, right, under that pressure. But for me, it was like when I finally learned, like, kind of how to teach the faith and the ideas and the topics. Then I'm like, all right, I'm going to go help conquer the world. And I'm going to go prove. So in a sense, I was arguing in the back of the room while I'm teaching on homosexuality. I'm arguing with my college professor who attacked Catholicism. That's who I was trying to teach in the back of the room. I was like, I'm going to show you. I'm going to teach the lesson that I wish somebody had taught me, and let's fight. And that whole sort of approach to things, that's not good, right? And so I think that helping people understand, imagine, and who are you giving this lesson to, right? Are you giving the lesson to the person that you argue with on Facebook all the time, your aunt who hates Catholicism and thinks the church is totally wrong on transgender and everything else and is backwards and we need to ordain everyone? And if you're giving a talk and that's who you're speaking to, it's going to sound way different than if you realize you're speaking to a kid who probably doesn't understand fully the real presence of the Eucharist and doesn't really even sure if he or she, cares about the Catholic faith, right? Well, then it'll sound a lot different. And I think so that would be something that I would encourage people to consider when you're giving a group catechetical talk or teaching a class. I wanted to move just a little bit into advice for individual pastoral conversations. Because I think as a catechetical leader or a teacher or a youth minister, you're going to have students. Not a lot, unfortunately. A lot of them probably will not come and talk to you if they're struggling with issues, but someone will, right? Someone will at some point, maybe many people. And so I want to just share a little bit about that, because I think we as diocesan leaders, as parish leaders, we need to be forming the people under us for both of these situations. And I think with this individual thing, I think it's really important, and I want to just share with you a little bit of my background in that. When I was in the seminary, I took 3 semesters of pastoral counseling classes, right? So how to talk to a person in a pastoral situation one-on-one. We had, as a part of that, we had our talks, our conversations. We do fake marriage counseling, which was weird when you're like doing marriage counseling to the secretary of the seminary and your rector, right? As the imagined husband and wife, right? And they're reading the script, and you're getting filmed pastorally doing marriage counseling to your teacher, right? But anyways, it was extremely helpful. And then we also I got blessed to be able to work with the University of Louisville for a year internship as a seminarian, working in their marriage and family class. So we got to work with actual people, who maybe couldn't afford, so you could come to the Archdiocese of Louisville and get marriage counseling or family counseling or individual counseling at a reduced rate because you were working with students, seminarians, University of Louisville, doctoral students, etc. So I got to work in that process. All this intense training, right? And professors, you go out and the professors are behind the screen, and you would go out and counsel a real person with real struggles, right? And then you would come back, and the professor, would tear you down a lot of times, or why'd you ask that, or those kinds of. It wasn't like combative, but just a lot. And at the end of that, so at the end of 3 semesters and after the end of a year internship, they told us, and I agree 100%, even with all that training in pastoral counseling, we are rightly told, don't talk to a person for more than 3 sessions, for more than 3 meetings. You have to help a person move from you to a professional, right? Now, I think a lot of times, so we need to help people understand, I think our youth ministers, our teachers, our campus ministers, we have to help them understand, first of all, their limits, right? We have to help them understand that, like, you don't have the training to do much more than a meeting or two with people, right? You do need to meet with them, right? If you told them, oh, sorry, I can't, I don't have a degree, right? That's obviously bad. But I think a lot of times the major problem that we have is, I think, not on that end, but on people overestimating their ability to really help people in these situations, right? I think, obviously, of course, we have to always review with the people that are under us. When you're doing individual counseling, the things that you have to report, right? So threats of suicide, harming another person. If we feel like there's been any kind of abuse that's happening, we obviously have to report that. So we have to let all of our teachers, all of our youth ministers, we have to remind them of those basic facts. Okay, when you hear these, you have to report them immediately. But I also think then helping people understand, right, that what you're doing, and I saw this in the notes from a previous talk on this topic, it's included in your packet. Whoever gave this talk last year, I think, used a really great word that I've heard used elsewhere, which is triage, right? If you were a youth minister or you were a teacher, you are on the front lines. When people are being hauled in off of the battlefield of relativism and all of the stuff that's going on out there, you're the receiving nurse secretary at the ER. If you said go away, that would be bad, right? But your job is to receive them and kind of triage and just be that initial welcome, right? Let them know that you love them, right? That you're there to hear them, that they're safe, that they can share with you what's going on, right? And so I think there's kind of three levels of, just as in the ER, right? I used to work in the ER as a janitor, okay, when I was in college, right? So an ER needs a janitor, right? An ER needs a secretary and a person at the welcome desk, right? There's levels of ability in that sort of pastoral one-on-one conversation. And so I think you have, first of all, at the lowest level of formation, you have a layperson who's not had any pastoral counseling classes or training of any significant kind, right? So you have that level, and that's where a lot of our teachers and our youth ministers are at, right? They're there. Now, that's not in any way to disparage them. It's just like we have to be realistic about what experience we have and what training we've had. And then I would say the second level, the medium level, would be our priests, and also anyone who serves who has had any kind of counseling, a layperson who's had any kind of that counseling training, right? That's another level up because they've had that. And then, of course, you have your psychologists and your psychiatrists who've gotten degrees in actually literally counseling people. So you have these three levels, right? And I think it's like kind of like an ER. You have those entry-level people, and then you have the general doctor, and then you have the specialist. And so thinking of this as a team approach, right? So my job as a youth minister, as a teacher, when a student comes to me and asks to have a conversation after class, whatever it might be, my job, I have to understand what I'm supposed to be doing, but also what I ought not to be doing. I am not the brain surgeon, right? I've not had any training, and I need to know that, and I need to appreciate that and understand that. But I still have a really important role to play, right? And I think that's also important to affirm that. I think a couple of things then to think about with regards to how do I do that? And I think this would be great to have as a school. If you're a school, if you could bring in a psychologist to give a talk to your teachers, if you're a parish with a big staff, if you could have somebody come in and talk to your staff, your diocese, your leaders, I think everybody on the front edge of the church needs to have some kind of in-service type of thing where they're kind of walked through these kinds of things, right? So I'm going to share these with you, but in the hopes that you might then go out and have somebody come into your specific situation or area or place or parish or school. But I would say to a person who's on this front end of receiving one meeting or two meetings with a student, it's really important to let the student tell their story. Right? That's piece of advice number one. Let the student tell their story. Be curious, right? Ask questions without trying to lead them somewhere. I think that's a really important part of it, right? We think, oh my gosh, I've got a transgender student, I got to fix them. No. You have zero training in that, right? Fixing is even the wrong word, right? And so, curious, asking questions just to allow this person to tell their story. How often for you has just telling your story on a smaller issue, maybe not one revolving around your sexual identity and your sexual attraction, how often has just, how many of you have told your spouse or your friend, I just need you to listen, right? That is a lot of times a huge part of that first triage opportunity. When a person comes to the church, an individual representing the church to them, where they can just tell their story. And so my questions as the triage person are just to kind of coax them along as they tell their story, which can always be motivated, again, by just a loving curiosity. What was that like for you? You know, those kinds of questions that just encourage them that they're safe to tell their story to you. And again, we know all the things that if they say, we have to report. But that a lot of times that's not the kind of stuff that comes out. I think so curiosity would be one word that I would encourage, you know, in letting them tell their story. I also think being calm is a really important one. They will know if you're uncomfortable, right? Because we all know. If I'm telling my story to someone and they're distracted, I know that instantly, right? If they're not interested in what I'm saying, or if they're uncomfortable with what I'm saying, it's going to be a totally different conversation. And as the person who just wants to talk, instantly, when they're distracted or they're uncomfortable, I start to think, instead of, hey, here's a person who will listen to my story, how quickly can I get out of here? Because this person obviously does not want to hear my story, or they're not sure what to do, they're uncomfortable with it, right? And I think, again, don't try to lead them. So I want to be curious, I want to be calm. Don't try to lead them in the conversation, right? Don't try to lead them anywhere. You don't have to try to, some people think this, you know, I got to lead this person to counseling, you know, or even worse, I need to heal this person. I need to fix this person. When this person leaves my office, they need to be fixed. That is arrogance, and that's pride, right? We would, a lot of times in our pastoral counseling classes, we would film ourselves giving marriage advice to our rector and our secretary. And we'd film the whole hour, and we'd take it with our professor, and we'd watch it. And about 3 minutes in, he'd stop, and he'd say, what's going on in you right here? And I'd be like, I went into that whole process thinking that we were going to learn the magic tricks of how to heal marriages. And the professor stopped the video all the time, and he's like, what's going on in you? And eventually what it came out as was, well, I was trying to heal that. And then he said, you're arrogant and prideful. You need to deal with you. Right? So it's hugely important and helpful for me to realize, you know, I'm not there to heal them in that sense, you know, using some psychological trick or, you know, Freud or whoever it is. I'm there to hear and receive and triage. I'm the front opportunity for them to say things. I think, again, and we see this like on, a lot of you probably have been on like senior awakening retreats or Christian koinonia retreats or whatever it is with high school students or college students. I remember I was working at my particular Catholic high school that I went to in Roncalli. The alumni come back and work as kind of college, you know, counselors, students. I remember being in a room one time. You know, we were kind of breaking down, hey, how's your small group doing? How's your small group doing? And somebody was saying, well, I'm just not getting them to open up. And even then, I knew nothing. I was a math major at the time. I didn't know anything about it. I'm like, that's weird. And when I look back at it now, I think not only is that weird, that's really wrong. Right? It's really wrong to try. Because why? We're motivated by pride. We want to have this huge conversation. We imagine ourselves, when the student comes and talks to us, a lot of times what we think is, we imagine ourselves being talked about at graduation when this student says, Father Hollowell changed my life, and he is so amazing, and he healed me in an hour. right? Or the senior banquet dinner. Mrs. Smith, I went and had a conversation, and it was she turned my life around. She's a saint, right? So we're motivated a lot of times by pride, right? Like we want to fix it. We want to be the healer. We want to have the magic touch. Oh, just come over here, Susie. I'll lay my hands on you. Okay, now, you're good. So make sure you talk about me at graduation. It's not, we're not trained to deal with what happens when we get someone to open up. We get them to open up, and then we're like, I have no idea what to do. Right? So we're pushing. Open up, because I need the rush and the high of having the experience of fixing you. But then they open up, and we have no idea what to do with what happens when they open up. Right? And so again, it says a lot about us sometimes that we want to be the savior. That's a huge red flag for all of us. It happens to all of us, and we need to work through that. Which is why you need a psychologist to come in and train your staff and train your students or your teachers, train your ministry people, have a walkthrough of this. I can't emphasize enough, I think it's really helpful if you can even enter into some role playing. Right? If you can have that opportunity where that is a great opportunity to practice, I think, those skills and have somebody kind of lead you through that. So I think, we go. Here's another thing, though. I think we a lot of times in those conversations, we try to go to, there are two deadly extremes that we can go to in these pastoral conversations one-on-one. One deadly extreme is, again, that we try to cure it, that we try to cure whatever it is that's ailing them. We try to cure their broken heart. We try to cure them of whatever it is that they've brought to us so we can be the healer and we can be Jesus. The other dangerous extreme, though, I think that we also have to make sure our teachers know, whether they're Catholic or not, or our youth ministers or whoever it is that the other extreme is the cool friend extreme, where you say, hey, you're struggling with this, and I know the church teaches this, but vomit, right? Whatever. But, I don't think that, or that's not right, the church isn't right, the church is wrong, the church is behind, the church will change its times, right? That does nothing but harm them either. Because all those people that were in the third way, they'll tell you that the one place that they found healing from their misery and the things that were that they were wrestling with and still are in many ways was the Catholic Church. So don't think that you're going to make them love you by telling them or downplaying the church's teachings in any way. That's obviously a really big problem too. So we want to avoid those two extremes, trying to fix them or trying to tell them that the church is just like this place of, I disagree with everything that they say. That doesn't help the students or our young people either. I was looking up, in preparation for this, I was looking up, what is it that, what else is out there? What's being said about transgender? And I found Father Bochansky, he just gave a talk recently at another conference a lot like this. I was really encouraged. He said his whole topic was basically, he was encouraging people, pastoral leaders, to have the students the title of his talk was "Tell Me Your Story," right? Tell me your story. So even from other places as well, we're hearing that. I think that's a really helpful way to kind of phrase that. Curious and calm conversation that is not counseling. If you like it in like alliteration, right? Curious, calm conversation. Curious, calm conversation that is not counseling. Could be a good way to think about that. And I think a lot of times we struggle, what's the difference between this method and those who take the easy road and say that sin is okay? There's a fear, am I selling out by just listening to their story? Because sometimes if we come from a place where we've moved really far in our faith process, we're afraid. We're like, gosh, I got to make sure I tell them, Catechism paragraph 2367 here as soon as I can, right? So we're like listening to them tell their story, but like, okay, when is God going to get mad at me if I don't drop the Catechism in, right? Just trust the process, right, of letting them tell their story. And that will lead to opportunities to take other steps, and the Holy Spirit will guide you, right? And so I think another piece of advice for people in these situations, pastoral leaders, teachers, youth ministers, etc., is to pray for our students. Pray while the conversation's happening. Pray after the conversation has happened. Fast for them, right? Fast for your students. Fast for the people that come to you and are talking to you. Those spiritual elements, of course, are a great aid in that pastoral process as well. There's that old line, of course, that is so true, that our students and our young people don't care how much we know until they know how much we care. And I think that is a great way to think of that. Again, I would ask or encourage you as a diocesan administrator, or parish, wherever you're at, as you think about how do you disseminate this information out to your people, how do you disseminate this information out to your teachers, to your catechists, I want to share just like when I first became a teacher, I was a lay teacher at Chittard as a 23-year-old, and we all had to go downtown to the Archdiocese as new Archdiocesan teachers, right? And I want to tell you, it was one of the most boring days in the history of my life, right? There were some good presentations, but a lot of it was awful. And I think something like this, teaching our teachers and our diocesan people, this has to be front and forward. This is the kind of question they're asking, right? This is what they want to know. How do I handle this? How does the church want me to handle this, right? Worry about the bus policy later, right? Or some other, whatever. Worry about those things later. And I'll say the same thing. I as a priest, and then also as a teacher, I've been at the schools retreats, right? We have a beginning of staff, the beginning of the school year staff retreat. I've been on 4 of those. They've all been wretched too, right? They were awful. It's like there's nothing really made about, the catechism. It's just bad, right? And so this is the kind of, do this at the staff retreat, right? This is the kind of stuff that our people are wanting to know, our people who are on the front edge, as opposed to, making everybody build a human pyramid or cups stacking to learn leadership or whatever. I mean, just who cares, right? This is the kind of stuff that people want. So use those days to bring in a professional who is a brain surgeon and psychologically speaking, right, who has a degree, and have that person lead your people through this sort of role-playing, kind of building some experience, just learning the basic tools so that when the patient comes in, they don't say to themselves, oh, I'm a brain surgeon, this person needs a shot of adrenaline, and they kill the person, right? So that they know the basics of what to do when in these individual conversations. There's got to be somebody in your community who can do that. There has to be a person in your local community who can give a workshop to your school, to your parish, etc. Let's see. I'm getting ready to, if you could pray for me, I'm getting ready to get my master's in psychology, starting that process at Divine Mercy University. And so I'm going to spend another 2 or 3 years. The crazy thing about it is that's going to move me from being able to meet with the students 1 to 3 times to 1 to 4 times, right? I mean, there's so much that's needed, but I don't want to, we don't want to shut down out of fear, right? That, oh my gosh, I can't talk because I'm not a professional. We have to give them some of the basic tools so that people know that they can receive others, but yet not try to do too much. I think that's the really important piece of that. So I think the question needs to be, how quickly can I get them to the next stage of the ER? How quickly can I get them to a counselor? How quickly can I get them to a priest without freaking out about it, right? Lovingly hearing their story, gently letting them, tell their story and move them along slowly to where it is that they need to go. So that's all I have prepared. I don't know if there are any questions. I actually have to take off here pretty soon for vacation. So catching a flight out of Cincinnati at 5:30. So I'll be praying for you, for all of you. So are there any questions that I might be able to answer here over the next couple of minutes?
Where are you going?
I'm going out west. No, to the Tetons. Going to hike a little bit in the Tetons. A little bit with Father Meyer, yes. Good priest friend of mine will be hiking around. So, yeah. Anything else? All right, well, I'll stick around. I don't know if there's a break. Oh, sorry.
I teach high school.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah.
I deal with homosexuality a lot, and I'm always being attacked by that. So I really like what you're saying. I think it makes sense. My other question, though, for you is, can you help me and anyone in this room find some really good resources of how the church truly teaches homosexuality and really be able to be more prepared for that kind of thing and those kind of questions?
Yeah, that's why we put together the Third Way. That's a 40-minute documentary. We raised all the money up front so that you can watch it for free, on YouTube and Vimeo. You can buy a DVD of it if you'd like, but it's all free and online. And then there's a study guide that goes with it. That's a couple bucks. I don't make anything off of it. And then interestingly, at the same time that we came out with the Third Way, Courage, who is the apostolate for those who are experiencing same-sex attraction in the church, they came out with another film very similar to ours, in that ours is a little bit more geared towards young adults and people who are Catholic but don't necessarily experience same-sex attraction. And then Courage came out with The Desire of the Everlasting Hills at the almost exact same time. And Father Paul Czech, who was the chaplain of Courage at the time, it's now Father Bochansky, Father Czech wrote an endorsement of the Third Way as well. So we kind of both pass on both films. When we, both of them are free online. Yep, on YouTube. I think The Desire of the Everlasting Hills might only be on Vimeo. I'm not sure. The Third Way is on Vimeo and YouTube as well. So yeah, both of those are free and available, and that's why we made them. I made it because I realized there was nothing. It's like necessity is the mother of all invention. I was like, I need something to show my kids, so I'm going to go make it. And God blessed that somehow, and it turned out and worked out. But yeah, so Desire of the Everlasting Hills and the Third Way, I would start there with young people. Sure, thank you.
Father, I'm sorry. Do you recommend this in the course of our curriculum, especially the theology of the body, just showing it to, the entire class that we teach, just for their educational purposes, or just for, well, I wouldn't want to single out kids who feel like they have the same sex attraction or whatever.
Yeah.
Generically show it.
Yeah, I would. I think I would probably show both if I could. If there was a way to work both into the presentation, because I think, and then while there's not really something similar at the moment for the transgender question, I think that it still would be a great way to kind of talk about. It's a lot of it in many. I know they're very different issues, but I think our response to them is essentially the same, sort of confusion about attraction or identity and those sorts of things. So I think that they help answer a lot of questions that our students would have. So I would encourage it if it's possible. Yeah.
One more quick question. How long, and this may be a legal question that's different, do we have to report something that somebody has revealed to us, self-harm issue type thing?
My understanding is that we basically have to go and immediately take steps as the conversation ends. And yeah. Yes. Yep, sorry.
Oh, somebody was asking about resources too. I haven't been able to watch it myself. We just purchased it, but there's a movie online. It's not Catholic, it's Christian, but it's similar where transgender person's telling their story. It's called Transformed.
Okay.
Transformed. Have you?
I watched the video. I've got the video.
How is it?
It's very powerful.
Transformed. TRANZ.
To do with transgender and, of course, homosexuality, and you're right, it's Christian-based, but the witness stories of the people there, and a lot of it was the same thing, that these were adults, but it was the very fact that many times it was that somebody listened to them.
Yeah.
That somebody, ultimately, like one church rejected this person, another church basically said, no, ultimately we're not going to agree with what, but we love you.
Right,
And
right.
it was that notion of love, that they love me, that let her leave the male lifestyle that she was leaving to go back to become a female. So it's
That's awesome.
Yeah, transform with the Z, right? I've got
Yeah.
a video. It's a good video. I've shown it to parents
Yeah.
who come to me saying my child is transgender, and I said, just watch this video. And that's Christian-based, so it's not going to have all like the Catholic teaching, but it can help them, and so it's helped parents to see the video.
Thanks, Father. I've not heard of that. That's great.
There's also a book which is written by a transgender person who went back to his original male status, and it's called The Faith of a Transgender. I forget
Walt
his
Heyer, H-E-Y-E-R, Walt Heyer.
Walt Heyer.
Walt Heyer, and it's Faith.
H-E-Y-E-R.
Faith. The name of the book is
The Faith of a Transgender.
The Faith of a Transgender.
It's a pretty painful and compelling story.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
Transgender.
Transgender's
He wrote Paper
faith.
Genders.
Pardon?
He wrote one called Paper Genders.
Yeah.
And talks about how you can change everything about yourself, but at the base level, you're always going to be your birth.
Okay, thank you. Paper gender?
Paper Genders.
Okay.
But it's compelling because he did transition and do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're never going to listen to, a priest or a catechist first, probably. Those personal statements are awesome. Anything else I can answer or help?
Higher, H-E-Y-E-R. Yes, H-E-Y-E-R. Wall.
Yeah. Yes.
What do you suggest when you have one student, but more so even a family member who you want to express that you love them for who they are, but you're not going to accept the way they're, I don't know,
Yeah. And that's the fear, right, for most of us, is that we are afraid that by listening to them, I'm going to endorse. And I think we have to just get over that and get comfortable and know that I don't have to start the conversation with that, right? So, in the conversation, I need to let them tell their story. They know that the church is in disagreement, right? They know that, if they're in a Catholic school or they're coming to a Catholic youth ministry event, they know that the church is in disagreement with them. They're not coming to have you tell them that. Now, if there is an opportunity, and particularly if they're engaging in, risky behavior or things like that, where it might be, I might need to drop that in there. That, hey, this, I love you, but I think we're so afraid that I think a lot of times that's the question, right? Okay, when in the first 5 minutes of talking to this person do I have to tell them that the church disagrees with them? And I think that we need to get over that and just let them tell their story first, knowing that the healing will come through that, and that I'm not watering it down, right? That's the big fear, right? We've been so attacked for our beliefs that we're like, gosh, I have to go out and proclaim it, and we do, but I think it doesn't need to happen necessarily on the front end of a person coming to us and telling us their story about their experience.
Is there ever a time, so it's easy to talk to people who are similar to you.
Right.
Someone who's acting out in this way or experiencing questions along these lines, are they ever dying for someone to recognize, yes, you're going through this? So you can talk about other things all you want, but at a certain level, are they ever crying inside or their families please notice that this is going on?
I think that the vast majority of people that are wrestling with this are not going to come talk to us, like you're saying, because I think they're not looking for, they've had bad experiences in the past, or they don't see me, or probably their youth minister or their teacher as somebody who has any understanding of what they're going through. So the vast majority of people will not. They're looking for, like you said, I think somebody a community, and that's when you go online, you find all these people who say, hey, we love you as you are, you're welcome here, you're accepted here, right? There's a really great line from one of our people that we interviewed in the Third Way, where she says, look, you go online and you find all this welcome and embrace and all this stuff, and you find a community, right? And yet so often, we're afraid of that. So how do we, that's why I think courage is a really powerful apostolate, and the apostolates that put people together and let them share their shared experiences. That's a great place to try and encourage people, because most of the people will not only, they just won't walk into the ER. So we can set up this and be good at triage, but they're not going to walk in, unfortunately. So trying to put as many things in there. Yeah.
So all that being said, what do you think about Father James Martin and his approach to this matter?
Well, I only have 5 minutes, so no, yeah, it's.
New Age Ministries. He talks a lot about finding a welcoming parish. If you have to leave your parish, there's a whole list of Catholic parishes that are friendly to LGBTQ people, and
Yeah.
he never talks about abstinence. He never talks about courage or encourage.
Right.
But he's always walking that fine line so he doesn't get in trouble.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I wouldn't have him come talk to my pastoral leaders. I think there's a piece missing, maybe, from what I see from him. I follow him on Twitter and stuff, and I feel like there's a piece missing, as you said. right? There's good stuff in what he's saying, but then there's also stuff that's not being said ever, and I think that's the problem, right? That's maybe skewing too far towards the cool. The church believes that, but not me, right? So I feel like, I mean, yeah, that would be probably all I should say. Yeah.
Father, you talked about us being frontline of triage, and most of us are dealing with under 18 years. After that second or third meeting, or even after the first, where do you suggest that we send them? That's the first question. The second question is kind of a follow-up as to what if their parents are okay with this lifestyle? So, and you don't want to send it back, to the parent.
Right.
situation.
So I would say, like,
that's the second one.
yeah, that next level, right? Where who are those next level people? That would be who you would want to help your people that are your teachers and everybody know who is the next step. Is it our school counselor? Is it our priest? Hopefully it's our priest, and hopefully it's our school counselor. If we're a parish, hopefully we have somebody on staff or a group of people. I think you need to have your resources, kind of clear in everyone's mind. Who is it that we're trying to get this person to next? After they tell us our story, and we kind of do that initial welcome and intake, listen, pastoral counseling. Who is it? And literally, here's the chain of command at Bishop Chittard High School. Intake, and then we're trying to get them to the priest, and then the priest would know who the local people in the area who are really, the psychologists and psychiatrists and so forth. But yeah, that's a yes.
Same vein as your question. Context of Catholic school. What's your approach with someone that's adopted by a same sex?
We had that. We've had that in both of the schools that I've been in, and that's. I think you really just that's up to the I was never a part of a diocesan policy setting or the school policy setting. I don't know where that all comes in, but once that situation is a part of your community, you just it's the same approach. I mean, with the student, right? If the student comes to talk, but I think again, hopefully there's also that idea of that hopefully it would be covered when you're talking. If I'm teaching that student, right? If the student is in my class and we're getting ready to talk about homosexuality, and I know they have same-sex parents, hopefully what I said at the beginning of this talk, when I'm making this constant reminder, I'm teaching what the church teaches here, and that if you ever need to talk to me, that you're always welcome, and it's a different we're still going to talk. I say it's a different conversation. Like, well, I'm going to teach here and then come over here and tell you it's all actually rubbish. Not that different in that way, not at all. But it's going to be you know what I'm saying? Like, just letting them know that they can always come talk to you, and that you're always going to welcome them, and that there's two different roles you're filling there. Yeah. I'll stick around for a few minutes. I'm not sure what's next on the schedule, and so I'll
Take a 10-minute break and meet back in 10 minutes, so at 3:05. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.